The words weren't whispered. They weren't softened. They were thrown across the dinner table like a final verdict. The greatest gift for your brother's wedding is you disappearing from this family forever. Claire sat frozen for a moment, staring at her parents as if she had misheard them. But her mother's face remained stern. Her father folded his napkin as calmly as if he had just finished discussing the weather. And her brother Ethan scrolled on his phone without lifting his eyes. For a second, Claire wondered if this was some cruel joke, but the silence around the table told her otherwise. She pushed her chair back slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. After everything I've done, that's what you want from me? Her mother didn't blink. It's for the best. Ethan needs peace before his wedding, not more stress. Ethan let out a short laugh. You always ruin things, Claire. Maybe it's time you listened for once. Claire felt something inside her shift, not break but finally stop bending. All right, she said quietly. You want me gone? Then I'm gone. She stood up, walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time felt something she couldn't name yet, but later she'd call it freedom. By the next morning, everything inside Claire felt strangely still, almost clean. She hadn't cried. She hadn't replayed the night. She simply woke up with a clarity that felt sharper than the sunrise. On her drive home the previous night, she had thought about every sacrifice she had made, canceling jobs, covering bills, fixing disasters Ethan created but never admitted to. She had always believed that loyalty meant love, and that if she stayed long enough, did enough, proved enough, someone in her family would finally say, thank you. But the truth had been sitting under her ribs for years. They didn't see her. They never had. Inside her tiny apartment, she made coffee and sat on the floor, staring at the planner she had filled with months of wedding deadlines, payments, designs, and schedules. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from vendors she had contacted on Ethan's behalf. She placed the phone face down on the carpet. No more, she whispered to herself. Today is the first day I stop saving people who don't want to be saved. And with that, she picked up her laptop and made the first decision that would start the collapse of the wedding her family cared about more than her. The first call was to the caterer. Claire kept her voice steady. Hi, this is Claire Thompson. I need to cancel all services for the Williams wedding. The coordinator hesitated. Claire, the event is in a week. I know, she replied. Please cancel everything and process any refundable portions. There was a long pause before the coordinator agreed. Next came the florist, who answered with warmth. Claire. Ready for final confirmations. Claire closed her eyes. Shli. I need to cancel the order. The florist sighed softly. You don't owe me an explanation. I'll return what I can. Call after call, Claire felt the weight she had carried for months fall away piece by piece. The band, the decor team, the transport company, every vendor who had been part of Ethan's perfect day, was released. By early afternoon, nearly all of her own $10,000 in deposits had been returned. Not because she planned revenge, not out of spite, but because she was finally choosing herself. When her phone rang and Ethan's name flashed on the screen, she let it ring out. Then her mother. Then her father. She didn't answer a single call. Silence was her first boundary, and she held it like a shield. That evening, Claire sat alone in her living room, surrounded by quiet. It wasn't peaceful yet, but it was hers. She looked around at the apartment she had neglected while bending over backward for her family. Clothes lay unfolded on the armchair, papers sat scattered across her desk, and dishes waited in the sink, but for the first time she didn't feel ashamed. This, she whispered, is the life I've actually built. She made tea and stepped out onto her small balcony. The city around her carried on, cars passing, neighbors chatting, someone walking a dog. The world didn't end just because her family had pushed her away. In that moment she understood something Mason had told her weeks ago. You're building a home in a place that keeps burning it down. He had been right. She had been trying to plant roots in soil that would never welcome her. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. Tomorrow, she told herself, the consequences of her choices would reach her family. But tonight she allowed herself the simple pleasure of standing in the quiet, letting life exist without demands, without expectations, without her family's constant weight on her shoulders. The next morning, Claire didn't bother checking her phone. She already knew what would be waiting for her: panic, anger, blame. Instead, she opened her curtains and let sunlight flood her apartment. She spent the early hours cleaning her space, folding the laundry, rewriting her freelance schedule, and adding back the clients she had been forced to put on hold. Just after 10 o'clock, her phone finally forced itself into her attention by vibrating with an incoming voicemail. She pressed play only because curiosity tugged at her. Her mother's voice erupted instantly. "Claire, the flowers aren't here. The florist said the order was cancelled. Fix this right now." Then her father's message. "What have you done? The band isn't coming. None of the vendors are responding." And finally Ethan's voice dripping with accusation. "You ruined everything. Fix this or don't bother coming home." Claire let the phone drop onto her couch. They still didn't see it. They still didn't understand. She had only honored their request, disappearing from their lives. And now the wedding they depended on her to hold together was beginning to fall apart, thread by thread, exactly the way they had unraveled her for years. By noon, the collapse was spreading faster than Claire expected. She didn't need to be at the venue to imagine the panic. She had lived inside that panic for months. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. Instead, she opened her balcony door and let the warm air drift in as she made another cup of tea. She was halfway through stirring the sugar when the phone began ringing non-stop, one call after another like an alarm. Finally, she checked the screen. Unknown number. Then another. Then Ethan again. She let them all go to voicemail. Silence wasn't revenge, it was peace. Her peace. A ping made her pause. A text from Mason. "Whatever's happening today, I hope you're breathing easier." Claire sank onto the couch, warmth pooling in her chest. "I am," she whispered. In her mind, she pictured the venue. Empty tables, no music, no food, no flowers, just confusion and echoes. She thought of her mother pacing, her father snapping at staff, Ethan trying to act like the leader he had never learned to be. If this were any other day, guilt would have rushed in. But guilt had been replaced by understanding. She hadn't undone their wedding out of anger. She simply walked away from a burden they forced on her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't holding their world together. Across town, the wedding venue descended into chaos. Guests began arriving, dressed in pastel colors, carrying gifts, smiling for photos until they stepped inside. The hall was silent. No music. No floral scent. No decorations. Claire could imagine the moment perfectly. Her mother gasping loudly, her father demanding answers, Ethan trying to convince guests that it must be a mix-up. But nothing could hide the truth. A staff member reportedly approached them with a clipboard, saying calmly, "There is no catering order under this name." Ethan's face would have drained of color. Elise, his fiancée, likely stood frozen beside him, her hands trembling. "Where's the florist?" Elise whispered to Mara. "Where's the band? Where's the cake?" "They're all coming," Ethan insisted. "They have to." But they weren't. Claire continued folding laundry while imagining the scene, her mother yelling, her father's voice rising, Ethan blaming everyone except himself. More guests arrived and whispered in confusion. Some left. Some stayed, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. The best man tried to distract people, but each minute made the disaster harder to hide. And all the while, Claire's phone filled with voicemails demanding she fix what they had broken long before she stopped trying. By early afternoon, Claire's voicemail inbox could barely keep up. Her mother's voice had shifted from anger to desperation. "Claire, people are leaving. The coordinator says we need to discuss cancellation fees. Call back." Her father sounded stressed. "This is embarrassing. Fix this before word gets out." And Ethan went straight to threats. "I swear, Claire, if you don't show up right now," Claire ended the message before he finished. She sat at her kitchen table, letting the quiet settle around her again. This was what happened when people relied on someone they never appreciated. She picked up her planner, flipped through the pages, and tore out every wedding-related sheet. She placed them neatly in a stack and slid them into a drawer. Someone knocked lightly on her door. It was her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Grant, carrying a plate of muffins. "Honey, you look calmer today," she said gently. Claire smiled softly. "I finally stopped trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix." Mrs. Grant nodded knowingly. Sometimes letting go is the loudest way to speak. After she left, Claire leaned back in her chair. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want their apology. She just wanted her life back. At the venue, the unraveling finally hit its breaking point. Elise burst into tears as the venue manager informed them that without vendors or food, the wedding would be officially marked as cancelled. Cancelled? Mara shrieked. We paid for everything. Actually, the manager said gently, none of the final payments were made. All eyes turned to Ethan. You said Claire handled it. Elise sobbed. Ethan rubbed his forehead. She did. Or she was supposed to. Guests stood around awkwardly, some whispering, some shaking their heads. A child asked loudly, is there cake at least? There wasn't. Mara stormed toward the exit, yelling into her phone, Claire. Claire, answer me. Colin tried calling vendors, demanding explanations, but each one calmly repeated the same thing: Claire had cancelled. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, the golden sun with no golden solutions. The wedding that Claire had built from scratch had dissolved in a single day because she finally stopped being the glue that held everyone else's life together. And for once she didn't feel guilty. She felt free. Back in her apartment, Claire stepped outside onto her small balcony. The breeze brushed her skin warm and steady. She closed her eyes and breathed in the quiet. For years her family had drained her, demanded everything from her, and offered nothing back. Today she had stopped giving. Her phone buzzed again, and when she glanced at it she saw only one message worth reading, a new one from Mason. I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. The corner of her mouth lifted. Me too, she whispered. She picked up her notebook, the one she used for her real dreams, not the ones her family assigned to her, and wrote only one sentence on a fresh page. Start over and don't look back. She didn't need the applause. She didn't need the validation. The life she was building slowly, quietly was finally hers. And while her family's world was falling apart, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Pure, uninterrupted peace. The next day, Claire woke up with sunlight warming the edge of her pillow. For once, there was no anxiety waiting for her, no frantic checklist of emergencies someone else dumped on her shoulders. She stretched slowly, letting her body feel the strange new lightness. Her phone was still off and she wasn't in any hurry to turn it on. Instead she brewed coffee, opened her windows and let the morning in. Later she walked to the small cafe on the corner where she used to work on freelance projects before the wedding swallowed her whole. The barista, a cheerful girl named Lila, smiled wide. Long time no see. Everything okay? Claire nodded. Things are finally settling. She picked a corner table and opened her laptop, returning to a design contract she had pushed aside. As she typed, she felt her shoulders loosen. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't fixing anything except her own life. Halfway through her work, her phone finally turned back on, began buzzing non-stop. She silenced it immediately. The joy of this morning was too precious to let old patterns interrupt it. Around noon, Mason stopped by the cafe. He spotted her instantly and walked over with that calm expression she had always admired. So, he said, sitting across from her, how's freedom treating you? Claire laughed softly. It's quieter than I expected. Quiet is good, Mason replied. You spent years drowning in everyone else's noise. She looked down at her coffee. Do you think I did the right thing? Mason leaned forward. Claire, you didn't destroy anything. They destroyed it themselves by depending on you for everything and respecting you for nothing. She swallowed, letting his words settle. I guess I just never thought walking away would feel like this. Mason smiled. Like peace. She nodded. He tapped the table gently. Then keep walking. Don't look back. It was exactly what she needed to hear. 2 weeks passed before she checked her voicemail. Not because she wanted to, curiosity simply caught up. She sat on her couch, took a deep breath and pressed play. Her mother's messages came first. Claire, call us back. The store is struggling. We need help reorganizing inventory. Another message followed. Your father and I can't run this place alone. You know the system better than anyone. Her father's voice joined next. Some of the suppliers won't extend credit without your involvement. They said you were the one they trusted. Then Ethan. His tone was angrier, thinner. You walked out on us. Fine. But at least fix the store. Mom and Dad are falling apart. Claire pressed pause. She wasn't shocked. This had always been the pattern. When they needed her, she became valuable again. When things were fine, she faded back into the background. She wasn't stepping into that cycle ever again. That night, Claire sat at her desk and drafted a short, calm letter to her parents. She began with kindness. She wished them well, she hoped they were healthy, she understood that change was difficult. But she didn't bend. "I will not return to manage the store," she wrote firmly. "I spent years giving all of myself and you made it clear I wasn't part of the family unless I was useful. I'm choosing a different life now, one that includes boundaries." She ended with a simple line, "I hope one day you understand this wasn't punishment. It was survival." She sealed the envelope, breathed out slowly and placed it by the door to mail in the morning. It felt like closing a chapter, not with anger but with clarity. By the time she mailed the letter, she already felt lighter. She spent her afternoons rebuilding her client list. New inquiries arrived. Old clients welcomed her back warmly. "Where have you been hiding?" one asked during a video call. Claire smiled. "Just finding my footing again." Her income steadied, her projects grew, and her days filled with something she hadn't felt in years: purpose without pressure. One evening while working at home, Claire paused and listened. There was no yelling. No tension. No one calling her name with another demand. She whispered to herself, "This is what life is supposed to feel like." And she meant it. Meanwhile, news traveled back from her hometown. Mason sent her small updates, never too heavy. The store was failing fast. Without Claire's organization, vendor relationships, or budgeting, shelves grew emptier. Ethan had tried to take charge, but running a business required more than confidence, it required consistency. Her parents tried stepping in, but years of letting Claire do everything had left them unprepared. Within a month, the store closed. A for sale sign went up on the property. Claire read the update quietly, letting it settle. "I'm not surprised," she murmured. It wasn't satisfying to hear. It wasn't painful either. It was simply the natural result of a system that had depended on her without ever valuing her. Ethan's life unraveled too. Elise returned her engagement ring the day after the failed wedding. She sent a short message, "I can't build a life with someone who doesn't take responsibility." Claire didn't celebrate the news. She simply acknowledged it with a calm breath. Some consequences arrive quietly, without applause, without revenge. And that was enough. As for her parents, they downsized to a small rental house outside town. Rumors spread among neighbors, but Claire stayed out of it. She didn't need to justify anything. She didn't need to defend herself. Her absence said everything they refused to hear. In her new city, Claire's world expanded in small, beautiful ways. She found a hiking trail she loved, one lined with tall pines that whispered in the wind. She discovered a little bookstore with old armchairs and free tea samples. She joined a weekly creative group where she shared ideas without being talked over. She built a circle of people who valued her simply for existing, not for solving their problems. One afternoon at the bakery where she often worked, Shirley, the owner, smiled at her. "You've changed," she said. "In a good way." Claire laughed. "I think I finally became myself." Shirley nodded. "Welcome home then." One morning an envelope arrived in her mailbox. Her mother's handwriting. Claire held it for a moment, letting old habits tug at her. But she opened it with calm, not fear. The letter was long but empty of true meaning, filled with mentions of stress, health worries, financial strain. "We need the family to come together," it said. "You're the only one who can help fix things." There was no apology. No acknowledgement of harm. No accountability. Just need. Claire sat at her desk, folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. She didn't respond. Instead, she chose her own life. She chose morning sun over morning stress. She chose projects that fulfilled her instead of responsibilities that drained her. She chose people who treated her with kindness rather than obligation. Weeks turned into months, and her new routine became her new normal. One evening, Mason walked her home after a community event. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked softly. She thought for a long moment. "I miss the version of them I hoped they could be," she said. "But not the version they were." Mason nodded. "That's fair." She smiled, grateful for someone who understood without needing the whole story repeated. As autumn approached, Claire's business grew stronger than ever. Clients recommended her. Local shops hired her for branding projects. She even received an email about a speaking opportunity at a small creative conference. "Are you sure you want me?" she typed back. The organizer replied, "Your work speaks for itself." Claire stared at the screen, her chest warm. For years she had lived in the shadow of people who pretended she had no value. Now she was surrounded by people who saw her worth instantly. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a windowless room. One Saturday afternoon, Claire met Mason for a walk in the park. Children laughed in the distance, dogs chased frisbees, and the path was lined with leaves turning gold. Mason watched her quietly for a moment. "You look free," he said. Claire laughed. "I feel free." "Do you ever think about going back?" he asked. She shook her head. "Going back means returning to a life where I had to earn basic respect. I'm not doing that again." Mason smiled. "Good. You deserve better." She looked up at the trees, sunlight dripping through the branches, and realized she finally believed that. Months later, Claire stood by her apartment window, watching snow drift through the early winter air. She held a warm mug in her hands and listened to the quiet hum of her peaceful home. Her phone buzzed on the table, a new message from a client, not her family. She ignored it for now, letting the moment wrap around her like a soft blanket. She thought about the wedding that never happened, the store that collapsed, the family who had pushed her away, and the life she built from the pieces they threw aside. None of it felt heavy anymore. None of it felt like hers to fix. She didn't need an apology to move forward. She didn't need closure from people who never gave her clarity. Her closure was this: a life chosen on her own terms, built with her own hands, filled with peace instead of pressure. Claire smiled to herself, whispering into the quiet, "Finally, this life is mine." And it was. Moral lesson: when people only value you for what you do instead of who you are, leaving isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's the beginning of healing.